Have you noticed how our obsession with doing more is everywhere? Do more, produce more, work harder, run harder, study harder, connect more, optimize more. We live in a society that has sold the illusion that success is a simple mathematical matter. The more you do, the closer you get to your goals. I bought that story completely. For years, my formula for success was identify what successful people did and do even more. Waking up earlier, working later, reading more books, taking more courses, meeting more people, trying more strategies. Until one day, exhausted and ironically further away from my goals than when I started, I discovered something that changed everything. The secret wasn't in what I needed to add to my life. It was in what I needed to subtract from it. Today, I want to share with you the most counterintuitive discovery of my journey. How I learned that sometimes the path to success is not about doing more, but about having the wisdom to do less and do better. We grew up in a culture that equates movement with progress, that confuses activity with productivity. Who believes that a busy schedule is synonymous with a meaningful life? We learned that stopping is laziness, that resting is a waste of time, that focus is limitation. I was a perfect product of that mindset. My identity was built on the amount of things I could do simultaneously. I was proud to be a busy person, always with 1,000 projects, always rushing from one meeting to another, always with a full schedule for the next 3 months. But there was a problem that took me years to realize. I was confusing movement with direction. I was running in circles, but convincing myself that I was moving forward because I never stopped moving. During a phase of my life, I had a routine that today scares me just remembering it. I woke up at 5 a.m. to meditate, read, and exercise. He worked from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. at his main job. From 7 p.m. to 10 p.m., I developed a parallel project. On weekends, I took online courses, networking events, and still tried to maintain an active social life. On paper, I was the definition of success in construction. In practice, I was always tired, always late, always with the feeling that I wasn't doing enough. Paradoxically, the more I did, the more things appeared on my to-do list. It was like trying to fill a leaky bucket. No matter how much water I poured in, it never got full. But instead of questioning the holes, I simply tried to carry more water faster. The breaking point came unexpectedly. It wasn't a dramatic burnout or a deep existential crisis. It was something more subtle and therefore more revealing. I just stopped being able to remember why I was doing all that. I was in a meeting about a project I had taken on 3 months earlier, and suddenly I asked myself, why did I say yes to this? I couldn't remember. It wasn't especially profitable. It didn't give me pleasure. It wasn't aligned with my long-term goals. I had taken over simply because someone had asked for it. At that moment, I had a disturbing revelation. I wasn't building a life. I was just reacting to external opportunities and demands. There was no strategy. There was no intention. There was no criterion. There was only an automatic yes to anything that seemed productive. I decided to do an experiment. Instead of adding one more activity to my already overloaded routine, I was going to subtract one. I chose to cancel a weekly commitment I had made 6 months earlier, an online course that wasn't inspiring, but that I kept doing for consistency. The result was surprising. Not only did I not miss those 2 hours a week, I felt more energized to invest in the activities that really matter. It was as if it removed a weight that I didn't even know I was carrying. It made me question how many other things in my life were unnecessary weights that I carried out of habit, not conscious choice. Inspired by the result of the first subtraction, I began to apply what I called a life audit. I made a list of all the regular activities in my routine and asked myself, for each one, if I were starting from scratch today, would I choose to do this? The answer was frightening. More than half of my activities failed this simple test. Projects that I had taken on out of social obligation, habits that I maintained by inertia, professional relationships that had become transactional and empty, courses that I took to keep up to date, but that didn't add real value. I began a gradual process of intelligent elimination. It wasn't about being lazy or negligent. It was about being strategic and intentional. It was about recognizing that my energy and time were limited resources that deserved to be consciously invested. The most counterintuitive finding was that the less I did, the more I accomplished. Not because I had developed superpowers, but because my energy was finally focused on the things that really mattered. When you stop dispersing your attention in 20 different directions, you can invest deeply in the 3 or 4 that really make a difference. When you stop saying yes to everything, your sins become more powerful. When it stops being superficially productive on 1,000 fronts, it manages to be genuinely impactful on a few. It was like the difference between a flashlight and a laser. The flashlight illuminates a wide area, but with little intensity. The laser focuses all its energy on a specific point and can cut through the steel. I stopped checking emails every 15 minutes and started checking them 3 times a day. I stopped attending meetings without a clear agenda or defined objective. I stopped accepting projects that were not aligned with my long-term vision. I stopped consuming content out of habit, news, social networks, random video. I stopped saying yes out of politeness when my intuition said no. I stopped trying to be good at everything and started focusing on being exceptional at something. I stopped multitasking and started doing one thing at a time with full attention. Each of these subtractions was like removing a stone from your backpack. Individually, the relief was subtle. Collectively, the difference was transformative. One of the most valuable things I've discovered when I've stopped doing so much is access to what I call deep focus. It's that state of mind where you can completely immerse yourself in an activity where time seems to stand still, where your best ideas emerge naturally. This state is impossible to achieve when your mind is constantly torn between multiple demands and distraction. It's like trying to listen to a subtle symphony amidst the noise of a building. No matter how hard you try, the interference makes the experience impossible. When I started protecting significant blocks of time for deep work, no emails, no interruptions, no multitasking, my ability to produce quality work increased exponentially, not just in quantity, but in depth, creativity, and impact. One of the fears that prevented me from saying no was the famous FOMO, fear of missing out. What if that opportunity was the chance of my life? What if that networking event connected me with the person who would change everything? What if that online course had exactly the information I need? But I learned something fundamental. In life, there are no missed opportunities. There are just different opportunities. And by trying to seize every opportunity, you ensure that you don't take full advantage of any of them. When I stopped chasing every opportunity that came my way and started being selective, something interesting happened. The really relevant opportunities started popping up more often. It was as if the universe responded to my clarity of intent by offering exactly what I was seeking. One of the most remarkable transformations was in the quality of my work and my relationship. When you're not constantly rushing from one thing to another, you can be truly present in what you're doing. My projects became better executed because I had time to revise them, refine them, perfect them. My conversations became more meaningful because I wasn't mentally checking the next meeting on the agenda. My relationships deepened because I was genuinely available, not just physically present. The irony is that by doing less, I have become more valuable to the people around me. My contribution was less frequent, but infinitely more impactful. Another unexpected benefit of doing less was the creation of mental space for creativity and innovation. When your mind isn't constantly busy performing tasks, it has the freedom to make unexpected connections, to explore new ideas, to question old assumptions. My best ideas always came in the moments of not doing, in the shower, on a walk, in those minutes of transition between activities. But when my life was completely filled, those precious moments just weren't there. Creating empty spaces in the agenda is not a waste of time. It is an investment in your ability to innovate and creatively solve problems. I began to see life as a garden. Inexperienced gardeners believe that a thriving garden is a full garden. The more plants, the better. Experienced gardeners know that a thriving garden is a curated garden, where every plant has room to grow, where weeds are regularly removed, where there is a balance between growing and pruning. In life, as in the garden, pruning is not destruction. It is the creation of conditions so that what really matters can flourish. Sometimes you need to remove the good to make room for the excellent. One of the areas where subtraction had the most impact was in relationship. When I stopped trying to maintain superficial connections with everyone, I had the energy and time to cultivate deep and meaningful relationships with some special people. I stopped attending social events out of obligation and began to carefully choose where to invest my social time. I stopped holding empty conversations out of politeness and started looking for dialogues that genuinely nourish and challenge. The result was a social network that was smaller in quantity, but infinitely richer in quality. Relationships based on authenticity, not convenience. Connections that energize me instead of draining me. Perhaps the most important distinction I learned was between being busy and being productive. Busy is state, productive is result. You can be busy all day and not produce anything meaningful. You can work a few hours and create something transformative. Our culture celebrates being busy as if it were a virtue in itself. But occupation without direction is just movement without purpose. It's like a revved engine in neutral, too much noise, too much energy expenditure, no real displacement. When I started measuring my success by the results I created, not the hours I worked, everything changed. Quality has surpassed quantity. Impact outpaced activity. Intention overcame reaction. There is a Japanese philosophy called essentialism that preaches less but better. It is not a question of doing as little as possible, but of doing only what is truly essential and doing it with excellence. When you identify the few things that really move the needle in your life and career and eliminate everything else, you free up an extraordinary amount of energy and focus to invest in those essential priorities. It's the difference between being a mediocre generalist in 20 areas and an exceptional specialist in 3 or 4. Between having 50 superficial acquaintances and 5 deep friends. Between participating in 10 projects with minimal contribution and leading 2 projects with transformative impact. I learned that no is one of the most powerful and underutilized words in the human vocabulary. Every conscious no you say is a disguised yes to real priorities. It's a statement that you value your time, energy, and attention as precious resources that deserve conscious investment. But saying no requires courage to disappoint some so as not to disappoint yourself. Courage to be misunderstood by those who do not see their long-term vision. Courage to choose the essential instead of the urgent. One of the most pleasant surprises of doing less was the energy that came back into my life. Physical energy, yes, but mainly emotional and creative energy. When you stop dispersing your life force in 1,000 directions, it naturally refocuses and amplifies itself. I felt more enthusiastic about the projects I chose to keep, more present in the relationships she decided to cultivate, more creative in the solutions he developed. It was as if I had rediscovered a more vibrant version of myself that had been stifled by over-busyness. As my life became simpler, my vision became clear. When you remove unnecessary distraction, you can clearly see what really matters. Their values become obvious. Their priorities become evident. Its direction becomes unmistakable. This clarity is transformative because it eliminates the paralysis of choice and the anxiety of uncertainty. When you know exactly what's important to you, decisions become easier, paths become more obvious, actions become more intentional. Perhaps the most important benefit of learning to do less has been sustainability. Success built on the foundation of doing more is always fragile because it is impossible to maintain maximum intensity in all areas of life indefinitely. But success built on the foundation of doing less but better is sustainable because it aligns with our real human nature. Because it recognizes that we are finite beings with limited energy that deserves to be consciously invested, not compulsively wasted. The biggest transformation, though, was in my definition of success. I stopped measuring success by the amount of things I could do and started measuring it by the quality of life I could create. Success was no longer about having the busiest schedule. It was about having the most meaningful commitment. It wasn't about meeting more people. It was about having deeper relationships. It wasn't about working more hours. It was about creating more value. That reset was liberating because it allowed me to compete in a game where I could actually win. The game of authenticity, of intention, of focus, excellence. The most valuable lesson life has taught me about success is this. Sometimes the way to more is through less. Sometimes the key to abundance is conscious subtraction. Sometimes you need to empty it to be able to truly fill up. We live in a culture that has convinced us that more is always better. More activities, more connections, more projects, more information, more stimuli. But this simple math ignores a fundamental truth. You are a finite human being with limited energy, and that energy deserves to be consciously invested, not compulsively wasted. The secret to sustainable success isn't in figuring out how to do more. It's in figuring out what to stop doing. It's not about adding more activities to your life. It's about subtracting the activities that don't serve your essential vision. Today, I invite you to do your own life audit. Look at all the things you do regularly and ask, if I were starting from scratch today, would I choose to do this? If the answer is no, you found your first smart subtraction candidate. Stop compulsively checking email. Stop saying yes out of politeness when your intuition says no. Stop attending meetings with no clear purpose. Stop consuming information out of habit. Stop trying to be good at everything. And notice what happens when you create empty spaces in your calendar. Notice how your relationships deepen when you're not always rushing to the next appointment. Notice how your creativity flourishes when your mind has room to breathe. Watch how your projects improve when you can fully dedicate yourself to them. The success you're looking for doesn't require you to do more. It requires you to do less, but do it with excellence, intention, and love. Sometimes, the most productive thing you can do is to stop doing everything that doesn't serve your essential purpose. The secret to success wasn't in what I needed to add to my life. It was in what I needed to have the courage to remove. What about you? What do you need to stop doing to be more successful in your life? What activities do you maintain out of habit, not conscious choice? Share in the comments. What's the first thing you're going to subtract from your routine this week? If this reflection made sense to you, leave your like and subscribe to the channel. Every day we explore paths to a more intentional and successful life. See you in the next video. And remember, you are allowed to do less. You are allowed to choose consciously. You are allowed to be strategic with your most precious energy, your life.